started coming out of NASA. But it wasn't until I actually got back in the newsroom that people were saying, well, it's overdue.
John Prock, videographer, WFAA, our affiliate in Texas. John Prock, we thank you for your efforts in giving us this insight in the immediate aftermath of the demise of the Space Shuttle Columbia, breaking up into several pieces there. Let's recap for those who are just joining us. As John mentioned, the Space Shuttle Columbia was at the tail end of a 16-day science mission, 7-person crew. They were headed back home, and somewhere over central Texas, 100 miles south of Dallas or thereabouts, this is what happened here. If you take a look here, you'll see what starts out normally quickly becomes multiple trails there, multiple trails. That's something that is very telling, and no mistaking that that is an in-flight breakup. The question as to why is another matter entirely, which we couldn't get into without getting very deep into the world of speculation. But that shot tells you what happened. Why it happened will be the subject of discussion for months and perhaps years to come. But here we go. Let's take a look at the shot now. I want to call your attention. Watch that fireball. That's normal. One streak, very hot, coming from orbit, 2,000 plus degrees, dissipating heat. Boom! Look at that piece come off, and then shortly thereafter, flash. See that flash right in there? And then a piece of smoke came off, a puff of smoke. Something happened there. So something happened first, then second. And then, as it went along, further breakup, sort of a 3-step process. A small piece, a flash, and then very shortly thereafter, multiple pieces of the Space Shuttle Columbia. At that point, traveling 12,500 miles an hour. Just to give you a sense of it, they travel around the planet at about 17,500 miles an hour. So having lost 5,000 miles an hour of speed already, still traveling the speed of a bullet. Let's take a look at the crew and tell you who was on board for this 16-day science mission. The commander, Rick Husband. If we can get some pictures up of them, that would be appreciated. Do we have the pictures? There we go. There's the crew. If you put that in Telestrator, I'll tell people who's who. Commander is Rick Husband, and I don't have it in the Telestrator, so I can just tell you. Oh, yeah, there's Rick Husband, and he is a colonel in the United States Air Force. And from Amarillo, Texas, truly the pride of Amarillo, Texas. On his second mission, his first mission, he flew as a shuttle pilot, STS-96, aboard Discovery. In May of 1999, they went to the International Space Station. Unusual, quite frankly, rise to the level of commander on their second flight, but Rick Husband was an unusually good guy and a sharp guy at that. Also on board, and this is Ilan Ramon, colonel in the Israeli Air Force. This was the first Israeli ever to fly in space, the son of a Holocaust survivor who spoke to us, and we're trying to get some of these interviews together that we shot with him beforehand. We're hopeful that we'll have them for you shortly so you can hear from them in their own words, but spoke to us at length about what this meant to his country and how his country, having endured the Holocaust, could not have fathomed an Israeli traveling in space, looking down upon the Middle East and the rest of the world. Also on this flight, Michael Anderson, Lieutenant Colonel in the United States Air Force, Plattsburgh, New York, his home. He was flying on his second mission. He flew in January of '98 on STS-89. Space Shuttle Endeavour flew to Mir. Although he is a person who sort of sat in the back of the shuttle and did mission specialist duties, has a lot of experience with flight in KC-135s and certainly with T-38s. Also on this particular mission, Laurel Clark, medical doctor, as you can see plainly there. Laurel hails from Racine, Wisconsin. Came to NASA in 1996, her first mission. Along with them, the pilot person sits in the right-hand seat, right beside Rick Husband. William Willie McCool, Navy commander, born September of 1961, came from San Diego. Reported to NASA in 96. This was his first flight.
CNN Headline News, I'm Sachi Koto. You're watching live pictures from CNN. We're interrupting our regular programming to bring you up to date with a tragic developing story. NASA has confirmed that the Space Shuttle Columbia broke up as it descended over central Texas this morning. The shuttle was more than 200,000 feet above ground when it broke up. NASA says it is highly unlikely that the incident was a terrorist act. Witnesses from Texas to Louisiana report hearing loud booms as the shuttle flew overhead. Search and rescue teams from the Dallas-Fort Worth area have been alerted. The shuttle was scheduled to land at Kennedy Space Center at 9:16 Eastern Time. Columbia was carrying a 7-member crew that included the first Israeli astronaut. They were returning from a 16-day science mission. Police in Nacogdoches, Texas report seeing numerous pieces of debris inside the city limits and the surrounding area. President Bush has been briefed at Camp David and is planning to return to the White House soon. Again, Space Shuttle Columbia broke up over central Texas as it was approaching Kennedy Space Center in Florida. NASA is planning to hold a news conference around 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time. Stay with CNN for updates throughout the day. We now return you to live extended coverage from CNN.
Those orange suits, those so-called pumpkin suits, launch and re-entry suits, they call them. Those suits were not worn in the years immediately after the first few missions up to Challenger. The crew went up in essentially a flight suit, just a jumpsuit, not a pressure suit. They wore helmets, but they didn't have the pressure suit. One of the reforms that came out of the Challenger accident was that these suits would be worn by the crew members as they rose to space and as they came back home. The idea being that if there was some sort of rapid decompression, loss of cabin atmosphere inside the flight deck and the mid deck, that the crew could survive. But as we pointed out not too long ago, as we pointed out not too long ago, this is not a situation where the crew would even have the option of bailing out. That altitude, that speed, it's not a goal. Let's listen to James Hartsfield one more time. Houston.
Continue through Space Shuttle contingency procedures designed to secure all information, notes, and data pertinent to today's descent by the Space Shuttle Columbia. Communications were lost with the Space Shuttle Columbia at approximately 8 a.m. Central Time as Columbia was above north central Texas at an altitude of 200,000 feet, traveling approximately 12,500 miles per hour. Search and rescue forces in the Dallas-Fort Worth area and in other portions along Columbia's planned route have been alerted to the Space Shuttle program contingency. Any debris that may be
All right, we're going to bring James Hartsfield down because it's a bit repetitive. If you've been watching, you know what he's going to say, which is don't touch any debris that you might see if you happen to be in that part of the world. Stay away from it. It could hurt you, could potentially kill you, and it's against the law to touch it, so don't do it. Let's go now to Jerusalem and Kelly Wallace. Kelly, Ilan Ramon, in many ways the pride of Israel.
Miles, exactly, the pride of Israel, and so as you might imagine, tremendous sadness, shock, and emotion throughout the country right now. A colleague of mine was talking to a top representative at Israel's space agency, and his quote is, "We are in shock." We know that Prime Minister Ariel Sharon, we are told, was watching events unfold on television like most of us were. His spokesman saying the Prime Minister watching those events. No formal official reaction, though, coming from the Israeli government until there is a formal announcement from NASA and from the American government. But we can tell you that when Colonel Ilan Ramon took off on the space shuttle, there was tremendous excitement in Israel. It was front page news on the Israeli newspapers, on the Israeli television stations, really a lot of joy. As you know, Miles, a lot of sadness in this country. There has been tremendous violence over the past few months, lots of concern about that. There were the elections just a few days ago, not a lot of excitement about that, but this was looked at as tremendous joy and pride. Colonel Ramon, we know, is married, has 4 children. His father, in fact, we understand, was watching some of the events on television at an Israeli television station a short time ago. We believe he has since left and headed to his home. Colonel Ramon has tremendous experience, more than 3,000 flight hours. Also, he took part in a mission back in 1981, a mission destroying the nuclear reactor in Iraq. He also took part in the 1973 Yom Kippur War. So tremendous pride in Colonel Ramon, and right now people are just still, Miles, holding out hope that this will turn out, but right now tremendous sadness throughout Israel.
It's hard to imagine the depth of sadness as we just sort of absorb all of this, Kelly, and it's difficult to even assess it here, but there, I think, in a very profound way, a lot of hopes and dreams were flying with Ilan Ramon.
Exactly. The representative from the space agency, again, talking to my colleague a short time ago, saying really everything is lost. All the work, all the experimentation, a lot of dreams, as you said. And again, the symbol really, this being the first Israeli astronaut in space, and also coming in the context of a very difficult time. This has been more than 2 years of violence in this country, the start of the second Palestinian Intifada against Israel. The economy is dismal right now. Lots of concern about the violence, the state of the situation, the future. And again, Miles, just looking at the media attention, looking at television and newspaper coverage of this, it was really looked at by many as one piece of really good news in a sea of a lot of bad news over the past few months, Miles.
It's stunningly tragic. Please, Kelly, stay close. Let us know what you hear from the government, what you hear on the streets. Of course, we're all harkened back to the last time this happened. 17 years ago this past week, we marked the anniversary of the Space Shuttle Challenger and its explosion a little more than a minute after liftoff from the Kennedy Space Center. 7-member crew died there. We marked that anniversary this past week. Tom Mentir, CNN correspondent, was live on the air at that moment, has covered numerous shuttle missions over the years. Tom, what are your thoughts?
Well, my thoughts go to the families of the 7 astronauts aboard Columbia, the family, the friends, the loved ones, immediately first. As you're well aware, the most 2 dangerous times are ascent and descent. And I asked them if we had the animation of not only the ascent, but the descent, when at maximum pressure and maximum velocity, the shuttle turns red hot underneath as it re-enters the atmosphere. And what you're seeing now in these pictures, the heat is just absolutely tremendous. And as you pointed out, the multiple targets, by seeing different pieces, it is something we, of course, have seen before, but not in the same dynamics that we saw this morning. But very, very difficult to watch, not once, but a second time for me.
Yeah, take us back to that day and what that was like and what happened in the immediate aftermath.
Well, the investigation, I was there for the search for the debris, which I'm sure there would have been larger pieces because they weren't as high up in the atmosphere as they were on this one. But the investigation is going to center around this debris field that you talk about being across a very wide area of West Texas. I'm sure that the pieces that they find will not be very large. The initial descriptions that we've been hearing from West Texas are very small pieces of debris. But it's going to be a very slow, long investigation that takes a look at the airframe. As you mentioned, these airframes are certified for 100 missions. And, of course, Columbia nowhere near that. But, again, certification and what occurs in flight or after flight, as we found out with Challenger, are not necessarily what's written in the books.
Well, it's worth pointing out to our viewers, and I know, Tom, you are well aware of this, 20-plus years after Columbia first flew, the first shuttle to fly, this is still an experimental vehicle, an experimental program. This is not an airliner, is it?
No, it's not. And every time these astronauts strap themselves in for a mission, they realize the dangers that they are about to face. They train for it. for months, if not years, before they fly, while they're flying, and while they're returning. They know what the dangers are that they're facing in this program.
They do. They do understand it. Tom, if you could stay close, we may want to check in with you in just a moment. I think probably this might be a good time to hear from some of the crew members. We, of course, interviewed them before they left and got a sense of their excitement for their mission, their zest for their job. A lot of them would tell you it really wasn't a job. Let's listen to Michael Anderson.
Well, unfortunately, this mission is so packed with scientific experiments and everything. As a matter of fact, when we return, we'll be the heaviest space shuttle ever to land. So there's not a lot of room to take anything personal or special with you on this flight. So basically, I'm just going to take my notebook with my notes and a couple extra pens and pencils.
All right, Michael Anderson. We spoke to all the crew before they left, and as they always do, we asked them about the risks. We asked them about their philosophy on the risks, and to a person they say it's all worth it. Let's listen to Rick Husband, the commander.
The shuttle is a great vehicle. It is so impressive every time I sit down and study the different systems to see how well thought out this vehicle is and how well it works every time we go and fly. The fleet actually is probably only reached about a quarter of its design life. So on our particular flight, this will be the 28th flight of Columbia, and each of the airframes was designed for 100 flights. So there's still a lot of life left in the shuttle fleet, and it is, I would say, a tribute to the people who work on the shuttle in the inspections that they do, and being able to find some very minor flaws like what we're talking about here, because they do a fantastic job in doing the inspections and finding these things. And it's just like it's just kind of like normal upkeep and maintenance like you would have on your car, except that this is a much larger system. And so
CNN Headline News, I'm Sachi Koto.
I'm Stephen Frazier. Thank you for joining us this morning. We're going to bring you extended coverage this morning of what is a developing tragedy. Word from NASA that they have lost contact with the Space Shuttle Columbia at about 9 o'clock Eastern Time, 8 o'clock Central Time, which is where the shuttle was believed to be at that time. Shuttle making its approach to planned landing at 9:16 a.m. Eastern Time at the Kennedy Space Center. Never made it that far. There are pictures of what they think was the breakup of the shuttle at about 200,000 feet, somewhere over West Texas. Pictures from our affiliate WFAA show what clearly is several pieces of the shuttle. Now you'll begin to see that one contrail turn into 5 over time as the shuttle makes its way on the path across Central Texas. There you go there. It's over Dallas here. We are now hearing from emergency response teams on the ground southeast of Dallas that there are pieces of debris on the ground in small towns like Palestine and Nacogdoches, which is about 30,000 people, and where several pieces have been spotted, very small pieces in fields, on roads, and to which police officers have been dispatched to guard them. NASA, by the way, is warning anyone on the ground not to touch any piece of debris they may come across. The metal and the materials in the shuttle could contain an awful lot of toxic chemicals. The propellants, for example, used to power the thrusters that change the shuttle's attitude in space are very, very toxic chemicals which can burn you instantly and can cause cancer later. So NASA's warning for people now in the aftermath of what they believe is the breakup of the shuttle is be careful of anything you can find on the ground. We've been tracking the mission, which was a scientific mission which contained a very significant first for the space program. 7 people on board this shuttle Columbia, including the first Israeli in space. He is, I believe, the one on the far right. And it's significant when you see this crew that they're wearing these orange suits, which are actually designed to help astronauts withstand an accident, usually on takeoff. You remember in the early days, in fact, the pictures of the shuttle Challenger, Sachi, we saw the astronauts boarding the shuttle in blue suits that were very lightweight. Then it was thought that perhaps they could design suits that were a little heavier a lot more protection and would afford the astronauts some measure of protection if they had to escape from the shuttle as it was lifting off, which is the most dangerous time. Therefore, you see the full helmets there, the full pressurized suits, but they would not be enough to withstand the kind of forces on the astronauts during a breakup at that speed and that height. The speed at the time estimated to be 12,500 miles an hour. That's about 6 times the speed of sound, and also 200,000 feet, barely any atmosphere there, even though they carry a little attaché case that contains pressurized bottled air to enable them to breathe until there is an atmosphere. That wouldn't be enough to save them there. We know that NASA has declared an emergency, but we know that they are going through their systems trying to find the last messages coming from the shuttle. They're in constant communication with it, not just verbal communication with the crew, but also telemetry of all sorts of technical data, including the temperature on the wings, the pressure on the outside skin of the aircraft. This would provide a lot of information that could give them a sense of what actually happened. We also know there's some question as to whether the shuttle might have been damaged on liftoff at the very beginning of this mission 16 days ago. There's some belief that a piece broke off from one of the rockets and may have hit the shuttle on the way up and might have done just enough damage to lead to this. But that, at this stage, is all speculation. And Sachi, we are at the point now where it is a rescue and recovery mission, and the investigation is actually underway even before the rescue and recovery mission has been launched.
Yes, Stephen, and a lot of the residents in the Palestine area say that they heard window rattling sounds. They said it sounded like a sonic boom. They said it sounded like a car was crashing into the house. And we'll have more on this later.
In fact, it sounds like it was a tornado sort of sound they were describing, first preceded by a double sonic boom, which is the signature of the space shuttle. They hear it over Florida when they're going to land, and that was the sign to NASA that people had in fact been hearing the shuttle. So we will tell you more about what they felt on the ground as our coverage continues, but stay with Headline News for extended coverage of these events this morning.
Right now of Mission Control in Houston, but the picture that we've been showing you all morning long is the final moments of the Space Shuttle Columbia as it broke up mid-flight, 200,000 feet, traveling 12,500 miles an hour. Our affiliate WFAA capturing this dramatic videotape, which gives us a sense of what caused, well, we don't know the cause, but we do know it was a breakup. The cause, all right, let's listen. We have been trying to get our affiliates to capture the shuttle as it came across the continental United States this morning. KOAT out of Albuquerque, New Mexico. A little darker there, of course, when it came across, but I think you can see that dot there. Try to help you out and just tell you it's right in that spot right there in case you're having problems. Not quite the shot that we got, obviously, out of the Dallas affiliate, but bear in mind, the breakup occurred over Texas. This is New Mexico, so these would have been, this is exactly what you would expect to see as a space shuttle would streak across the night sky on its way to its landing. I'm sorry, I didn't get that. All right, as we look at that shot, and we will tell you that the president was at Camp David when it happened. He's on his way back, should be there about noontime, and that's where Suzanne Malveaux is. Suzanne, what do you have for us?
Well, earlier today I spoke with White House spokesman Scott McClellan, who said, yes, the president was notified of the situation by his chief of staff, Andy Card. They made the decision that it would be better to monitor the situation here from the White House. As you mentioned, the president is on his way back to the White House. He'll be here shortly after noon. Also spoke with a senior administration official who said that there was no indication that the shuttle had any type of threat that was against it, or that was in any type of range of anti-aircraft, anti-missile range, and that there was no indication that this was any type of terrorist situation. Of course, they're still getting lots of information, but initial indications from senior administration officials saying that it does not point in that direction. I should also tell you as well that sources tell us that the president, when he comes back, is expected to make a statement, some sort of briefing, that he is also expected to call Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon, as you had mentioned before, one of those on the shuttle, an Israeli citizen that the president president is all likelihood to call him later this afternoon, and that we will hear from Mr. Bush when he returns. Miles.
CNN's Suzanne Malveaux. We'll, obviously, the minute the president gets back and makes a statement, we'll be getting back to you, so stay close, please. Let's go to Elizabeth Cohen. Elizabeth Cohen in the newsroom here has had an opportunity to speak with members of one of the crew members' family. And we're just going to leave it at that right now. Elizabeth, what can you tell us?
Miles, I was speaking on the phone just a few moments ago with the brother of one of the astronauts. I'm not going to name the astronaut just to protect the privacy of this family. But he said that in the past 2 hours since the contact was lost, the families have been speaking with each other. The families of the different astronauts have been speaking with each other. They met each other at the launch. There were various activities for the family members. I am sure that they did not expect to get back in contact with one another quite in this way. This gentleman was saying that he expects to be summoned to a memorial service, perhaps in Houston, sponsored, given by NASA. He expects to get that phone call soon. And again, the families turning to each other for support in this difficult time. Miles?
Did they indicate there is a fairly rigorous protocol, if you will, that NASA employs, where they have people assigned to each family member to assist them through all this? Did you get any sense that that was occurring, and were they getting the support they need?
The man who I was speaking to is a brother of one of the astronauts. He said he had had no contact from NASA. Now, perhaps the astronaut's spouse had contact, or parents, or somebody else. Perhaps this person hadn't, but others had. He did indicate, though, that he expected, and that the families expected, that they would be summoned back in.
Elizabeth Cohen, thank you very much. Let us know if you find anything else out as we continue our coverage here.
Thank you.
Let's take a look at a live picture which tells probably as much as this shot we've been showing you. Kennedy Space Center, that's in front of a place they call the Turn Basin, right beside the countdown clock. In the distance, Launch Pad 39A, where the Space Shuttle Columbia launched 16 days ago. It was a beautiful afternoon launch, the flag at half-staff, in memory of the 7-person crew of Columbia. And that launch pad, hard to say when that launch pad might be used again. Very premature to even discuss anything along those lines, but there you see it. There you see the flag, and that in many ways sums up what we
have dispatched a small team down to the Kennedy Space Center, where it was so much more than just a professional, and as you pointed out, 1981. He is a payload specialist who's been the entire Israeli public was watching and really had their heart in their hands. And at this moment, you can imagine how many hearts across Israel and certainly in this country as well are breaking right now. Miles.
Andrea Koppel, thank you very much. Certainly that is the case everywhere right now as we pause to think about those family members. Let's take a look at a picture. We've been getting some email images in from our viewers, and this is the first picture we've seen from Nacogdoches County, Texas. And I've been calling it Central Texas. I'm told by some people it's more accurate to call it East Texas, but it's safe to say that there's a big, wide swath of area that has been seen, what you're about to see as I scroll down here, which is a piece of debris on the ground there. If we put it through the telestrator, I can highlight it for you. Hang on, I over-scrolled there. Hopefully get it up to the point where we've got it in a place where you can see it. There you see it right there on the pavement. It looks like it's right near an apartment building. What I want to reiterate is what NASA has been saying all morning long, which is don't touch it. Contain all kinds of hazardous things. Hydrazine is just on the top of my list right off the bat, which is a very nasty substance which is used to fire the rockets on orbit and also powers the auxiliary power units. Nitrogen tetroxide, which can burn you. That's an oxidizer which mixes, creates those thruster firings on orbit. Don't go near it. It can hurt you. It's also, I should point out, against the law. We've been listening in to members of the crew. I'm hopeful that we have some more of those interviews ready to go. We talked to the crew. Okay, apparently we do not have them quite ready. We're going to try to. All right, we have a reporter from where? All right, we've got somebody at the Kennedy Space Center to check in with us. Grayson Carl. Grayson, I don't know, you're with Central Florida 13.
That's right, Miles.
Grayson, tell us what's been going on there.
With Central Florida News 13, I cover the Kennedy Space Center in this area. It's a very, very surreal feeling out here. You know, we've done this several times before. You stand up, you get ready for the landing. We all look down south, and we look, and nothing came. And we're used to hearing a pair of sonic booms that come in a few minutes before the landing as the shuttle drops back through the sound barrier. And we didn't hear that anymore.
And welcome back to CNN Headline News. I'm Sachi Koto.
I'm Stephen Frazier. We are interrupting programming to bring you some devastating news coming from NASA, from Mission Control. The flag is now flying at half-staff at Kennedy Space Center, where the shuttle Columbia was expected at 9:16 this morning. NASA now reporting, though, that the shuttle instead broke up in re-entry at 207,000 feet above Texas. There are pictures of the scene as the shuttle was flying over Dallas and headed toward eastern Texas. And now we're hearing reports from the ground that there is material from the shuttle on the ground and that rescue and recovery teams are on the way to it. Again, we'd like to reiterate NASA's warning that you should not touch any of the pieces that have landed because they may contain toxic materials, and they're also very important to the investigation of what happened. Columbia, the oldest orbiter in the fleet, 22 years old. There's some belief that what happened to it may be the result of an aging spacecraft. A lot of missions, a lot of miles. This is a 16-day mission purely for scientific experiments, considered highly successful in the completion of those experiments while in space. Also, an example of what the space program is like. A crew of 7, mostly Americans. 1 American, though, born in India, trained in India, went to college in India, a mission payload specialist. Also, the first Israeli in space, and that has led to an awful lot of conjecture, which we can give no weight to now, that perhaps the shuttle was brought down through some terrorist act, some attack on the fact that Colonel Ilon Ramon, a test pilot in the Israeli Air Force, was on board. He's the man at the far right in this picture of the crew that you're looking at right now. Sachi, can you tell us what people on the ground in Texas have found out?
Yes, they said that it sounded like a tornado. They said it sounded like a car that was hitting buildings. It was a loud boom they heard overhead. Also, I would like to say that President Bush has been briefed on this. He is returning from Camp David to the White House, and the White House has issued a statement saying there is no hint that there was terrorism in the space shuttle's disappearance this morning. And we're going to look at a tape live now from the White House.
Well, earlier today, I spoke with White House spokesman Scott McClellan, who said, yes, the president was notified of the situation by his chief of staff, Andy Card. They made the decision that it would be better to monitor the situation here from the White House. As you mentioned, the president is on his way back to the White House. He'll be here shortly after noon. Also spoke with a senior administration official who said that there was no indication that the shuttle had any type of threat that was against it, or that was in any type of range of anti-aircraft, anti-missile range, and that there was no indication that this was any type of terrorist situation. Of course, they're still getting lots of information, but initial indications from senior administration officials saying that it does not point in that direction. I should also tell you as well that sources tell us that the president, when he comes back, is expected to make a statement, some sort of briefing, that he is also expected to call Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon, as you had mentioned before, one of those on the shuttle, an Israeli citizen, that the president is all likelihood to call him later this afternoon, and that we will hear from Mr. Bush when he returns.
And that was Suzanne Malveaux reporting from the White House.
Coincidentally, we're hearing that NASA was preparing, and there were Israeli embassy officials on the ground in Florida taking the family of Ilon Ramon to Kennedy Space Center for the welcoming ceremony for the shuttle's return, scheduled for 9:16 a.m. The only other information we want to leave you with now is that they do have information on the ground, they do have material on the ground, and it's very important, NASA says, that citizens who encounter it just call rescue and emergency teams in their area and let them know. Do not touch it, do not take it, don't even go near it, we are told.
Yes, we're hearing that it's dangerous and also against the law to touch it.
So stay with Headline News and CNN for the duration of our coverage, which we'll keep extended all day long as we report more on what we know on the loss of the Space Shuttle Columbia today.
fragile. About 20,000 of them on the Columbia alone, along with blankets and carbon and all kinds of things to protect what is an aluminum frame as it comes in for re-entry. Aluminum would be soup if it wasn't protected by that thermal system. But it's a very fragile system, and it remains the most labor-intensive aspect of keeping the shuttles aloft and keeping them flying. Now, Grayson, the conversations I had with engineers there was, we've looked at this debris falling off, we focused on where it landed, and we don't think it's a big deal. Did you hear the same things?
That's the same thing I've heard. You know, these flight engineers do this for a living. They do it every day. They find problems, and they have to make that analysis on whether it's safe and what the conditions are, whether they need to make repairs, what can happen. But
all right, we just lost our signal, unfortunately, from Grayson. And with that, we're going to turn back to Jerry Lininger. Jerry, are you at home? Jerry?
Yes, I am.
Okay, Jerry in northern Michigan at home, who veteran of the shuttle, veteran of Mir. Jerry, it's been a little while since we talked. I'm curious if anything else has come to mind for you on what might have happened here, what sorts, and I don't want to get way ahead of this, but I mean, let's give the areas of interest that would be some of the prime suspects in this.
I think you've been covering them well, Miles. I think, you know, it's very dynamic, obviously, a lot of friction, a lot of pressure buildup when you're streaking through the atmosphere. Friction's what slows you down. You're inside a big fireball, plasma collapsing around you, so its airframe is the first thing I would worry about. You know, metal fatigue, things of that nature. I think what you mentioned, you know, if there's a defect in the insulation, a tile at a critical point, you know, if it hits for example, a control mechanism and you lose control of the vehicle, the top of the vehicle, for example, cannot withstand the type of heat that you take during re-entry. So, you know, all the things you're pointing toward are things that you have to be concerned about.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, it's a heck of a crew on board as you go through the people. And
let's talk about them a bit.
Well, just, you know, skilled, dedicated, courageous people.
Yeah.
And I guess the other thing, the people on the ground, you know, besides not touching it for their own safety, I'm sure everybody wants to, in Texas and around the world, wants to make sure we figure out what causes it so it never happens again. So.
Yeah. Jerry, you've been inside the space program and know exactly what happens and how NASA prepares for these to aid and assist the families. What is happening right now to help these families out?
There's usually a family escort, and that's many times an astronaut that goes along with the family, especially during the launch time. And at landing, it sort of depends on the family's request and how comfortable they feel. If it's maybe the guy's third or fourth flight, the family feels comfortable in knowing what to do. But on first flights, a lot of times they'll provide an escort to be with family. If they're going to be there at landing, I'm sure there's people there to kind of tell them what happens during landing and to ease their concerns. And now, of course, they're there to try to comfort them.
And it's probably a challenge which, well, it's got to be an incredibly difficult time for them and for these families to try to sort through all of this. Jerry, this is something that astronauts certainly know about, but I wouldn't say they fear it.
I don't think they fear it. You know, we have confidence. You heard Rick Husband, the commander, talking before he left. He's got confidence in the vehicle. Got confidence in all the great people that make that vehicle go to space. And, you know, it's obviously a tragedy of great, you know, depth here. And, you know, there's a lot of people feeling very badly. I'm sure everybody in the world feels badly.
What does this do to the program, Jerry?
You know, the interesting thing, you flashed up there, there's a cosmonaut and 2 astronauts on board space station. So you've got a space station up there orbiting that depends upon the shuttle. You have other means. You can use a Soyuz capsule, the Russian capsule, to get there. But, you know, I think exploration and discovery and going out there and pushing the envelope, and that's what the astronauts do every day of their lives up there in space.
Jerry, you mentioned an important point. We have a crew up there, Don Pettit, Ken Bowersox, Russian cosmonaut, whose name is escaping me this moment. I apologize for that. Budarin, I believe. And it is, they, at this point, are sort of not stranded. They have a Soyuz capsule there, which they can take to leave any time. And I guess we should point that out to our viewers. Are you there, Jerry? Okay. All right. Let's move on, and we'll think about that point a little bit later. United Space Alliance is the prime contractor for the space shuttle. It's a synthesis of a couple of big aerospace companies, Boeing and Lockheed Martin. USA is the prime contractor, which does the work in getting a space shuttle to orbit and bringing it back and turning it around. A lot of people don't realize that most of the employees at NASA work for contractors, and the NASA civilian force is actually a small part of it. The real work is done, in many respects, by the United Space Alliance. With us on the line now is Jeff Carr, spokesperson for USA. Jeff, are you in Florida?
No, Miles, I'm in Houston near Mission Control.
What can you tell us from your perspective? What have you seen? What have you heard? And do you have any sense of where things are headed right now?
Well, Miles, as frustrating as it may be to your viewers, we really don't know what happened. You've done a great job so far, I think, of laying out the sequence of events, and I was listening to your interview with Jerry Lininger, and I thought he brought some very level perspective to it. But right now, we're working closely with NASA to go back and review all of the data, look for anything that might be a telltale sign of what occurred. Unfortunately, our first indication that anything was wrong with what looked like a picture-perfect reentry this morning came with that loss of communications. And until we do determine what happened, our primary concern is with, of course, the safety and well-being of the crew. And until we know what happened, that's going to continue to be our primary concern.
Jeff, once again, bear with me here, because I don't want to get too far down the road of speculation, but I do want to address this issue because it's out there. This is the piece of debris which fell off on ascent while it was rising to orbit. What can you tell us about what we know about that? As I've been telling our viewers, the sense I got from talking to people at NASA is that they discounted whether it, well, they basically said it wasn't a big deal.
Well, I would take exception with their discounting it, Miles. I think what happened is a lot of very smart people took using good technology, took a good look at the imagery that was available and analyzed that image and basically determined that it was not conclusive.
Jeff, let me interrupt you while you say that. Let's get that image up if we could, that ascent image, the launch image where we see, I believe if you look closely, you can see some debris falling off. Go ahead, Jeff. What was the determination as they looked at it very closely there?
Well, basically, Miles, it was a non-determination. There wasn't any indication, any immediate indication that there was any damage of note. And I think it's really, at this point, much, much too early to begin speculating that there's any linkage between that event and what has occurred this morning. We don't know what the cause is, and it just wouldn't be productive to speculate at this point.
No, and I don't want to do that, and I don't want you to have the sense that that's where I'm headed with this. It's just that this is something that people are aware of, and I wanted to at least get a sense from you as to where it stood and what the feeling was. I mean, the shuttle, in the course of its 113 mission history, has lost tiles before.
That's true, but at this point, we don't even know that there were tiles lost or to what extent they were lost, Miles. And this is one of many, many stones that's going to be overturned. We're going to be looking at every scrap of information and evidence that could help us understand what happened today. That activity is going to be ongoing for days, weeks, maybe months. I don't know. But right now, our primary concern is to determine as best we can what happened and to determine the safety and well-being of the crew. And Miles, before we go too much farther, I really want to say that those of us at United Space Alliance, our hearts go out to the families of the crew members. Their families are our families. We're a very close-knit community, and we want them to know that they're in our thoughts and prayers.
Yeah, and that's worth thinking for a moment about. Tell me this, Jeff. Can you walk me through re-entry and give me just a sense of what the vehicle encounters from the moment it does that deorbit burn all the way down to landing at the Kennedy Space Center?
Well, of course, Miles, the two most intense periods of time during a shuttle mission are the launch and ascent and the entry and landing. The launch and ascent lasts 8.5 minutes. The process of reentry, an hour. From the time the orbital maneuvering system engines burn to deorbit the vehicle, there's a great deal of energy stored in the vehicle as a result of all the energy it's gained during ascent and that it possesses.
And welcome back to CNN Headline News. I'm Sachi Koto on this very sad day for NASA and the world.
I'm Stephen Frazier. Sad because apparently the Space Shuttle Columbia has been lost during re-entry at the conclusion of a 16-day mission in space. And we'd like to learn more about the nature of re-entry and the stresses on the orbiters placed during that process by talking with Jerry Leninger, a former shuttle commander and an astronaut who spent quite a bit of time aboard Space Station Mir, the earlier space station that predates the one currently in the air. Jerry, are you with us on the phone?
Yes, I am, Stephen.
Thanks for spending time to join us, and I'm sorry to be talking to you under these circumstances. We've been hearing about the altitude and the speed of the shuttle at the time that communications were lost. These are numbers that are hard for most of us who just fly on airplanes to envision. In orbit, the space shuttle is going about 17,500 miles an hour. Then it slows down on its way in, and what happens to it? What are the forces on it?
Well, you're trying to get down to zero, and throughout that re-entry, as you get lower into the atmosphere, those tremendous speeds, you point the tiles in the right direction, bottom of the shuttle, and you glide back, and it sounds like a locomotive train, probably the worst turbulence you've ever been in your life. That's during a normal re-entry, so very dynamic, big fireball around you, plasma collapsing around.